Between the 1680s and 1720s, a transformation took place in Blekinge. Parts of the barren archipelago of Blekinge was reshaped into one of the largest and most technologically advanced cities in the nation. The city plan and the construction of the naval city Karlskrona was included on the UNESCO list of World Heritages in 1998. The actual work started like this. The man Plumbing is the captain of the Swedish fortifications in the late 1600s. His name is Carl Magnus Stuart. The work of Stuart and many others laid the foundation of the city we today know as Karlskrona. In 1679, in this very neighborhood, lived a farmer called Vitus Andersson with his family. He knew nothing of the plans others had in store for the island he called home. In the late 17th century, at the time of Karlskrona's construction, Sweden was a superpower. The Baltic Sea was under complete Swedish domination and was called Mare Nostrum, our sea. The Swedish king, Charles XI, was very determined to keep and strengthen this dominion, and since the position of Stockholm was perceived as distant and was constantly covered with ice, a decision to move the navy was made. Vitus Andersson, who didn't want to move, was ignored in the grand scheme, driven off from Trosse and put in jail. He didn't receive any economical compensation until 10 years later. By that time, he, weakened by illness, lay dying. It is also said that Vitus, before leaving Trosse, cursed the city threefold. Karlskrona was to burn, be struck by the plague, and be drowned by the ocean. Two of these came true, the plague of 1710 and the fire in 1790. And even if these stories should be read as folklore, they also have to be read as demonstrations of the resistance of the people of Blekinge against what they saw as the occupying force of Sweden. After all, Blekinge had only been part of Sweden for 20 years at that time. The king had issued a list of conditions to be met by the new location for the naval base. Among the list were various items, including the fact that it had to consist of a triad of a civilian city, a naval base, and a shipyard. It also had to establish the image of Sweden as a European superpower. The first things planned were churches, forts, and other locations that could highlight the presence of the power. The city was divided into military and civilian parts and protected against external enemies with the help of a large fortified wall surrounding Trosse. In order to prevent entry and to suppress any potential threats in advance, Erik Dahlberg built his masterpiece Drottningskär Citadel, which today stands on Aspö and is easily reached by a free ferry trip. The proposed center of town was what is now Amiralitetsparken. Influenced by foreign cities, the Admiralty Palace was planned to be built there, complete with its own bastion and streets shooting out in a fan pattern from the palace. The city plan was heavily influenced by contemporary ideas of the ideal city, and the vision was a more international-looking city than could be found elsewhere in Sweden. With the city plan of 1683, the work of our friend Stuart was at its end, and he was transferred to Stockholm. The foundation had been laid. Over the coming 15 years, 30 islands became one city. A rationally planned idea was coming true. The first church to be finished was Amiralitetskyrkan. It was opened in 1685 and was originally conceived as a temporary measure for larger construction works. The last preserved bastion of Karlskrona, Aurora, can be found outside the church, along with a piece of the fortified wall originally intended to protect the whole city. The Holy Trinity Church on the main square was opened in 1709. The adjacent church was designed by Nicodemus Tessin, introduced in 1733, and is, just like the other churches, open for visitors nowadays. In 1790, a large city hall was also built in the middle of the same square. Karlskrona grew rapidly and became the third largest city in the kingdom after Stockholm and Riga. The settlement of Blekinge helped make the newly acquired province more Swedish. The city that had been planned proved to be an impossible ideal due to the astronomical costs of its construction. Thus, the 1724 city plan had been changed and slimmed down. What is remarkable is that all plots and streets as portrayed in the city plan of 1724 are exactly the same as today. Many of them are also named after the people who created and shaped the city. Stumholmen was originally 3 islands and has, just until very recently, only been used by the Swedish military. Here, you can find many of Karlskrona's most interesting 18th and 19th century buildings, together with Kungshall, which was built at the time of the city's foundation. Today, Stumholmen is a popular and beautiful tourist destination where you can visit the Maritime Museum and admire the well-preserved buildings that are used as apartments. Defense policy, war, and peace have always determined Karlskrona's development. The shipyard, which is historically the pride of Karlskrona, has through the years come under threats other than military. The 1700s were a turbulent time for Sweden. 1721 ended Sweden's great power and dominion for over half a decade, as Sweden was marked by political unrest and economic difficulties. For Karlskrona's part, however, an upswing came when King Gustav III ordered the renovation and modernization of Sweden's entire military. In Karlskrona, one of the foremost shipbuilders of the time, Fredrik Henrik af Chapman, was hired to lead the work in the shipyard. During the early years of the shipyard, very impressive progress was made, including building the Polhem dock. What may seem incredible is that these structures were used for many years, actually until the present day. Repslagarebanan from the 1690s is Sweden's longest wooden building and was used for production for nearly 300 years. Since the shipyard is still used in military operations, it can only be visited during guided tours. What was so special about this shipyard was the fact that so many of its features could interact in a way that is reminiscent of the 1900s assembly line principle. Under Chapman's leadership and engineering wizardry, boat construction was shortened to months instead of years. Also, nearby Björkholmen, which housed the majority of dock workers, has an exciting history. The area's so-called Björkholm cottages were built largely of stolen or surplus materials from the shipyard. The existing houses are younger than that, but the tradition of the peculiar appearance has been retained. The productive 1780s ended in disaster. After 3 years of war against Russia, Karlskrona was ravaged by a fire that destroyed 2/3 of the city. The destruction was so great due to illegally kept gunpowder barrels. Also, typhoid hit Trosse and claimed many lives of its residents. The 19th century brought about the Industrial Revolution. During this time, the town was connected to the mainland and went from being an island to becoming a peninsula. As one step in the conservation and continued use of the town environments, the Blekinge Museum is housed in Grevagården, built for Hans Wachtmeister, one of the city's central figures in the year 1705. Although the city never became exactly as great as planned, the foundations for a World Heritage Site were still laid. This World Heritage Site is not a single place. It is not a single building or even a single city planned. This World Heritage is an idea and the history of this idea. So when you tread on the cobblestones of the town square, the grass outside Kungshall, or even on the asphalt of Witte Street, you're walking in a part of a living world heritage. A heritage that stands to be looked at through other things than the polished glass of museum showcases.